Hey everyone. So, over the past 11 months, we've all heard story after story from both the US and Canadian media about Canadians and international tourists being pulled into secondary or even detained. It's not showing up in the news anymore, but make no mistake, it's still happening. And for a lot of us in this community, we're just avoiding the situation entirely just to stay safe. But here's the real question: how much do we actually know about what happens once CBP pulls you in? We know phones get searched, but to what extent? How deep does it actually go? Today, I wanted to share an interview with a fellow Canadian who went through this firsthand. Mr. R has been a longtime viewer of this channel, and he has reached out because he wanted to warn everybody about what he experienced when CBP pulled him into secondary. Before we get started, today's backdrop comes from Martin, who took this photo from Harrison Mills in British Columbia. If you look closely, you can actually see a bunch of eagles in the shot. So thank you, Mr. Martin, for sending this great photo of my home province. All right, let's get into the discussion with Mr. R. Thanks very much for meeting me. And can I refer to you as Mr. R?
Absolutely, and I will refer to you as Mr. Leaf to keep things short.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. R, for meeting me. And I wanted to help you share your story because when you reached out to me via email, we have a lot of reports when it comes to cross-border issues and especially when it comes to CBP. But I felt that your story is unique to what we actually hear through the media. So before we start, can you give us a basic introduction?
Absolutely. And thank you, by the way, because I know that my initial email to you was very long. So my name is R. I'll just leave it at that. R. I live in Toronto, and up until the last few weeks, I was a federal public service for the government of Canada, and my specialty was human resources. And in fact, my retirement date became effective while I was away. I will also add here that the only reason that I'm not going to be using my full name or even show my face, because at this stage, I really don't care what I say in public about my experience, is that if I do have direct flight to Mexico or to somewhere more south, and there's a mechanical issue with the airplane, and then I have to divert to the US, I thought, right for now, I'll just keep myself as R and not really have my face there, just in case something like that happens.
Oh, for sure. It's a legit concern, right? In my channel, I've been always telling people not to do stopovers. But if there is a mechanical issue and you're going to Mexico, you would have no choice but to stop in the US, right? So it's definitely a safer bet to keep your anonymous persona here. So it's totally fine with me.
But then again, if there are agents that I tell my story that are listening to your channel, they'll probably recognize my voice and put two and two together. But that doesn't concern me.
Got it. You went on a cruise and they had a port of entry in the US. This is a little bit different than driving across the border and even flying in via a pre-clearance airport. Can you briefly explain the incident that happened when you were on the cruise?
Absolutely. And it is exactly how you just explained that, Mr. Leaf. And as one of the things that I was sort of beating myself up over after I got back is that I spent so much effort concentrating on getting through the pre-clearance at Pearson that it completely I forgot about taking a cruise, that it would go to international waters, and I would be returning to the US again and entering again. So I had forgotten about that. And for a little extra context, I can't even say that I'm a novice to cruising because I've done more cruises than my age. So there's a significant number of cruises that I've taken, and I should have realized that, but I've dealt with that now. I've forgiven myself for being somewhat, brain dead on that particular element. But what had happened was I did two back-to-back cruises. And the first one, I still had to go through the customs, but it was just facial recognition. I was back on the ship right away. There was no issue. So maybe I'll back up 1 second. Going through Pearson, no problem. Going through the first cruise in the customs in the United States, no problem. It was when I was coming back from the last cruise, the ship, I guess customs had reached out to the ship, and I was flagged as a person of interest before the ship had even docked.
Right.
And it was at my disembarkation is when I noticed things were differently. And what followed was being questioned by one border agent, then being pulled into secondary and questioned by two more. My belongings were put through x ray. Then a full search of everything, including my wallet, was done. And then that final step was them telling me that I had to surrender the passwords to my phone and laptop. And they gave me a little tiny pre-printed form that I basically scanned but they allowed me to keep it, which I did.
Mhm.
And of course, I was left with the impression that there was only compliance. I couldn't deny. And because, as you had said on your channel before, if you go through pre-clearance in Canada, we could say, I'm going to withdraw, turn around, and leave. But
Right.
there on their soil, I felt I had no other choice but to comply, which I did.
Right. Sorry, the cat. Can you hear the cat?
Nope.
No. Okay. Good. Okay. Can you give me a second? I gotta move the cat out because it's a little bit distracting for me. Just 1 second.
Okay.
Just 1 second. I'm so sorry.
No,
The
no, no, no. Your cat is an addition to your channel, but I didn't hear the cat.
yeah. I mean, I think Zoom might do a better job than my audio software, the editor, in terms of filtering out the cat. But for me, when I'm sitting here, I'm watching the cat, I'm hearing it, and it's a little bit distracting. So let's get back into it. So I guess my question to you after hearing all this, when that happened, what was your immediate reaction? Because I mean, it seems like everything was going fine, and then instantly a person of interest.
So to my final departure, and yes, I definitely knew something was not right because for anyone that's a cruiser that's going to be listening to this, they would know that, you would tap on with your card and in some, depending on the cruise line, it could be a medallion. And normally what happens, your picture comes up, security looks at you, says, okay, have a nice day. I hope you enjoyed the cruise and off you go.
Hmm.
In this case, I tapped my card and there was a big sort of orangey yellow color pop-up screen with no picture. There was
Hmm.
small wording, but I didn't have my distance glasses on, so I couldn't read the wording. However, as I was processing what was going on, another crew member came over and she said, "Sir, I'm going to need to take your passport." And she had several pieces of paper folded up in her hand. I went, my goodness, what did they print out about me? And she
Hmm.
says, now I will have to escort you to border services into the terminal. So
And
I had to go with,
sorry, was that a cruise ship staff or was that a member of
yes,
CB? Okay, so
yes. So I guess that's what had happened. The ship was notified that the minute I would click my key card,
mhm.
that this thing would pop up. They already had things printed out. Whatever was on that printout, I will never know. So
Wow.
they had staff standing by. So then, as again, she had to escort me past everyone else. Then I picked up my suitcase and she had to wait there with me while I got my suitcase. And then she took me directly right to an agent inside the terminal.
So they escorted you. You had no choice but to follow her to the CBP desk, I guess, right?
Oh, yes. That wasn't even an option to question. It was like she had the passport in her hand. And
Mhm.
I hate giving my passport to someone because, it is really a Canadian document if we think
Yeah.
about it. And so I really do not like that. But there was no ands, ifs, or buts. It's like, okay, you have to do this. I'm escorting you to the agent. She went to the agent and says, I have a POI for you. And then the agent took my passport and whatever papers she had. And then she left, and I was with the first agent.
Got it. So with the first agent, I mean, what was your feelings and what was going through your mind?
So the questions from the first agent.
Hmm.
So when we do get our Nexus cards, they told us at the beginning that sometimes we may be pulled for random screening. So because the first agent was asking me all types of questions, when did I leave Canada? What ports of call were I at? And blah, blah, blah. I thought still a little bit optimistically that, okay, this is going to be it. And so this is
Yeah.
going to be the screening or the extra questions that need to take place, because I was probably with him for anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes.
Hmm.
But it was then through my peripheral vision, I saw two more agents coming from the side, and I thought to myself, this is not looking good, and I don't think it's going to end here.
Right.
And of course, I was right. So the two agents, they then approached me and they said, "Okay, you do have to come with us. We need to take you over here to secondary." They brought me into this room where there was the X-ray machine, and they said, "Please put all of your luggage." And I have this little pouch that I wear over my shoulder when I travel. So
Hmm.
that had to go in addition to my little jacket. So literally, and my wallet came out and went in as well. So like I was just there with my clothes on, and that was it. And I didn't have to take shoes off like an airport.
Hmm.
Then, everything got out the other side. And I thought, okay, well, they've looked through this, maybe just a few more questions. But then they said, okay, now we're going to open everything and go through. And they did an extensive search. So the first suitcase was open, the big one, and
Hmm.
they went through everything. The second one, she went through everything, including my medications that I had there. She went through every piece of ID in my wallet. And I thought, my Lord, this is a bit of excessive in my view now. It sort of crossed that threshold to like, okay, being random and asking a few questions to like, my goodness gracious, they
Right.
practically got everything hauled out. But well, there were two surprise things that they said. One was they really focused on the element, even the first agent really focused on the element of, why are you traveling by yourself? Do
Hmm.
you ever travel solo? And I sort of looked at them and I said to all of them, I said, yes, I travel solo all the time. And if you go into the history of each time I've entered the United States, should probably be able to see it, because I went through that, because there is a website where you can look at all the times you've gone to the United States.
Hmm.
So I've already consulted that. But I said, and I said to the other two agents that were doing the secondary, I said, it's always been Florida, by the way. I said, nowhere else in the country. I said, a few times I've been stopped in Florida, whether at airport or on a different cruise. It always seems to come to you as a shock that
Hmm.
people travel solo. I said, that surprises me. And I said, if I have permission, can give you a suggestion. If you do have spare time, go to YouTube and type in solo travelers, and you might just be amazed at how many there are. But the second thing, Mr. Leaf, that really took me by surprise, because, being in HR, and I've overseen a lot of investigations. So this time the tables were turned. I was the one being on the other side. So I maintained my calmness. I was going to make sure that I wasn't going to have any type of body language or say anything that could speak to deception or make them think that I was being deceptive or hiding something. So
Right.
I just stood there being quiet. And I think that silence made them uncomfortable. Maybe they're more used to people asking a lot of questions or looking nervous. And so
Hmm.
one of them actually volunteered and said, you're probably wondering what we're doing. And I
Hmm.
said, well, not particularly. I says, you know what I've done, because they asked me about my career. I says, we had standards of practice in our workplace, and likely you do as well. So you're probably following your standards of practice. So I don't have any questions. But she
Hmm.
said, you know, we're just verifying that you're not a gangster or have gang relations or a terrorist. I
Hmm.
said, oh, okay. Now like I didn't show it on my face. I didn't follow up with a question or say, oh my goodness, I don't live that type of life. But I thought, what a very unique and odd thing to say to someone, because I would think that, they would want to keep the search or the reason for the search more secret and quiet.
I think they're probably looking for your reaction on it.
Yes, I
That's
agree.
what it sounds like. And depending on how you would react, that's how they would proceed to either give you more questions or how they would treat you after that. So it sounds like you were just keeping a straight face and it kind of confused them, I guess.
And I agree with you. I think that's what had happened
Yeah.
because, in my field of HR, when I worked in it, I would be looking at body language to make a recommendation about an outcome, whatever it was. So
Hmm.
body language and what people would say or not say, their tone of voice, all of those things were considerations. And because I stood there as if I was having a conversation like I am with you, that probably rattled him. It's like, this guy is not really seeming to be too bothered by this.
Yeah. Which, in a sense, I mean, it shows that, hey, it doesn't show panic, and it shows that you're just going to go with it, I guess, right? And they're not going to let them push you around.
Yeah, and that's part of it. If anyone finds themselves in that situation, that would be a recommendation. Just
Hmm.
remain calm.
Yeah.
Pretend it's one of your friends you're talking with. Be very honest and forthright. I help her set up my laptop because I don't use the key touchpad. I have a mouse that gets
Hmm.
plugged in. And so I said, I could help you set that up if you want. So, I was just, I worked with them. So that way they had no reason to say this person was adversarial or confrontational.
Right. Now, you just mentioned that you helped them to get your laptop set up, access to the device. Did they go through thorough searches on your phone and your laptop as well?
Oh, beyond thorough, my friend. I'm sorry to call you my friend. I should be
It's okay.
calling you Mr. Leaf.
No, no, no. It's all
Uh,
good. All good.
a part of that little slip when I read it afterwards, I was there. So they took my devices and I was placed in this little hallway, very brightly lit, and it had cameras. They gave me a bottle of water, and there was a bathroom there, thank goodness, so I could use the bathroom. Not sure if there was a camera in there or not,
Mm.
but that remains to be seen. However, they took my devices, and when I read that little form when I got home, it clearly stated that everything was being downloaded from both devices. So, and I knew that. I think one of them casually mentioned that they have to download everything. So I was sitting in that little hallway, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I don't have a lot of things on my phone. It was probably like 40 pictures. And not very much on my laptop. So, in my little naive mind, because I don't have a technical background, I was thinking, okay, this probably will be done in 20 or 25 minutes. But then it wasn't.
Right.
And it kept going. I think you were probably a little bit interested in what was going through my mind during that waiting period. And I could certainly speak to that now. And the first, I say half hour to 45 minutes, I thought, okay, well, you know, Microsoft has a lot of software on my laptop, so that's probably one of the things. But
Hmm.
the thing about the human mind, and certainly when placed in a stressful situation like that, though I didn't want my external body to show stress, inside I was thinking, okay, what's going to happen? Why is it taking so long? Now we're an hour. Now we're an hour and a half. We're going into 2 hours. It's like, okay. Then I really started to think, am I going to be like one of the stories you presented where suddenly I'm detained and put in some center in Texas or somewhere else? And I thought, they have my communication devices. I
Hmm.
can't even discreetly let anyone know from Canada, that I would be gone. And
Right.
because, it takes me a couple of days to get my errands done, family and friends usually don't hear from me for a couple of days. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, like nobody is even going to know that I'm gone from Canada probably until the middle of next week if that happens.
Right.
And once we pass the 2 hour mark, I'm thinking, okay, either there's going to be further questioning. This is not looking good. Perhaps I will be in detention. And then perhaps a little bit of paranoia. I was thinking, could they actually be installing something on one of my devices that's not me, but putting evidence on there and then come back and saying to me, we found this on your computer or we found this on your phone?
Right.
Thankfully, they, re- one of the agents came out and she gave me my device and she said, "You're fine now, and have a nice trip back to Canada." I'm
Wow.
like, well, that was that nice trip back was sort of ruined, but
Yeah.
and no explanation offered, nothing else. Just two and a half, like the entire point from or time frame from the time that I was escorted off the ship until I actually was allowed to leave the terminal was roughly 3 hours.
Wow, so 3 hours the second you got off the boat, and
Yeah.
that was time that you really had no idea what would be going on in the future.
Absolutely. I was under their control. I was under whatever they had to tell me to do. And I knew the best way to deal with that was to not speak, to
Right.
only speak when spoken to.
Mhm.
So, though, I speak a lot here with you, there are times that I know when to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah. What surprised me, I mean, I know they're doing device checks, whether it's your phone or laptop, but I didn't actually realize that they gave you a printed note or statement
Mm.
saying that they actually are going to download everything on the other laptop.
Oh,
So,
yes,
yeah.
absolutely. Like, I didn't have a chance to read it all right there and then
Mhm.
because they basically said, "We have the right to seize your laptop and your, um, phone and to get your password." And
Mhm.
knowing past stories, I said, "I'm not gonna argue with it," and I knew I had nothing to hide, so I said, "Here
Yeah.
you go." But when I came back and I read that little slip, and this is what stood out on that slip as well, is that I don't know if they actually sometimes if somebody is staying there for an extended period of time, because one of the things that was covered in that slip was, uh, if we can't get everything done now, an agent will make arrangements with you to along. I'm paraphrasing here. This is not
Mhm.
word for word.
Yeah.
An agent will make arrangements with you so you could come back to get your devices or have them shipped to you. So there
Right.
may be situations where they release people if they're in the country, but they keep the devices and then they have to go back and fetch them again.
How would that work if you're a Canadian? They keep your device, then you have to have a flight back to Canada. Would you have to go back into the US to get your device, or would they mail it to you? I mean, I don't know if you have the answer to that, but I'm just kind of thinking if they were to keep Canadian or international tourist device, you have really no choice but to stay until they're finished, right?
And I think that's what took so long. So I think they realized that I had a flight that afternoon back to Toronto.
Mhm.
And I think that's why, I was there for 2.5 hours while they were downloading everything. So
Yeah.
they probably thought, let's get everything. But, there was still, a part of me that when, I was let go the
Mhm.
first time or the only time, the paranoia didn't truly go away. And I was in the Uber going down or the Lyft going down to Miami airport. And I was thinking, could they be flagging something now for border services at Miami airport? Like, am I
Right.
going to go there and all of a sudden a set of handcuffs going on me? But then the rational side, like this little inward conversation was taking place with me while the Lyft driver was asking me about the vacation. But then
Mhm.
the rational side suddenly came in. I says, look, I said, truly, if there was any sort of criminality that they were going to suspect me of, I would have been detained right there and then and not let go. So
Yeah.
I sort of used that logic to calm myself down. However, my computer still was flagged for swabbing, but not a download, but swabbing when I went through Miami airport.
Mhm.
So that makes me wonder if now, because of this, if my name is somewhere in the system as now always going to be a person of interest.
Do you have any idea why you were flagged as a person of interest? I mean, would anything come to mind that might have triggered it, or?
The only thing, I the first cruise wasn't initially planned because I had booked my sort of retirement cruise like almost 2 months ago.
Mhm.
And again, thanks to your channel, I took a lot of precautions and unsubscribe from people. I also started doing YouTube searches on things that I don't not even interested in, so the algorithm would just show up those types of recommendations.
Right.
D- But 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 I've done this before. However, it was under the Biden administration when I did this before. I booked the 4-day cruise, the first one, just 2 days before I had taken it. I had canceled an Airbnb, got the refund, and I took the cruise to join the two of them together. And that was really the only thing that stood out, that I said, okay, maybe they thought it was odd that I flew into Miami. I think it was Sunday, November the 9th.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden, it was like a day later, I booked this extra 4 days to the cruise because that wasn't, it was in such a short time frame. But then I was thinking, again, how could they have known that? But
Yeah.
they would have, because when the cruise, or when the 4 day cruise ended, I still had to walk through and do the facial recognition and go back on the ship. I didn't get off in between. So they would know, obviously, that I was on that first one. But what maybe they asked the cruise line, when did this guy book this trip? When did he take book the 4 day one? I think, Mr. Leaf, I will never know the true answer, because I
Right.
mean, some of the stories that you covered, when people were actually detained like for weeks on end, they were never given an answer. So
Hmm.
for my little situation, I think I will never know what flagged me and why they did everything that they did.
I mean, this is just from me hearing your story, but it sounds like they were kind of targeting the fact that you were a single traveler or solo traveler. That would be my guess. But yeah, you're right. You'll probably never know the real reason why you were flagged as a person of interest.
But I think you do have a point there, Mr. Leaf, because again, in the past, and we're going back maybe a decade and a half, when I would have to approach, getting off a cruise ship, this was not the first time in Florida. And if any of your listeners are from Florida, my apologies, but Florida is a very unique state with a very, I guess, unique way of looking at the world, I would say.
Hmm.
And even like a decade ago and a decade and a half, I would be asked that question as well. It's like, you mean you took a cruise by yourself? It's like, well, yes. Am I not allowed to do that?
Right.
No, it's just so strange, right? So I think you do hit on something, that I was a solo traveler, that I did two cruises, because I was asked about that before. So maybe that had flagged it. But I also know too that, as if anyone else that does cruises, they do also have these informal social gatherings for solo travelers. So
Hmm.
I know that I wasn't the only solo traveler on the cruise as well.
Right. A question that I just thought about right now. I mean, when you were pulled into secondary or questioned, did you notice anybody else there, or was it just you that was being held?
It was me for the longest, just one man and a woman. They
Hmm.
were pulled in after me. They were only there for maybe 5 minutes. And the reason for the two of them being there is that they bought some expensive jewelry somewhere.
Okay.
And apparently, wherever they bought the jewelry was supposed to give them a green slip that was supposed to be given to the customs agent, I guess, to collect duty on it.
Right.
So whatever store they were in, they forgot to give the green slip. So they filled it out, and then everything was fine. So they were literally there at probably like after my secondary screening is when they came in, but
Hmm.
they were only there for 5 minutes, and then they were released again.
Got it. So it wasn't the same scenario as you, I guess.
No, and the poor lady, like, she was very nervous, and I looked at her and says, the gentleman explained that it's only the slip. So I said, you have nothing to be worried about now. And he even said, once
Hmm.
you get everything organized in your suitcase, you're free to go. So I said, there's nothing to be concerned about anymore. So I calmed her down, and off she went.
Was she? Do you know what nationality she was?
Now, this is something that was, she was an American, but her
Okay.
husband was British. And it was her husband, I guess, whatever that he had bought is where the green slip wasn't given to him. So that's what made them stand out. But I did want it, like, because I did have 2.5 hours after all to ponder on all this. I thought, hmm. I said, it was the husband's green slip that was forgotten, which could be completely legit. However, I said it was rather ironic that he too, was not a US citizen. He was flagged because it made me think, does everyone get that green slip? Perhaps it's forgotten a lot more, and they just wanted to do that extra because they made them open your luggage, but not to the extent that I did.
I think on my channel, I've always covered the land crossings, the air crossings through pre-clearance and things like that. But I never really factored in when you're on a cruise, you're in international waters. But when you get
Mm.
back to port, you have to go through the whole CBP process again. So definitely something that I overlooked. And I never really thought about that. And I really appreciate you sharing your story on this. Before we close off this interview, I mean, do you have any advice for anybody that goes on cruises or, anyone that might be considering to go?
Absolutely. A little bit of humorous input here. Don't be like me and make the mistake that I made, because just as you summarized quite eloquently, I should have known better. I should have known, because that's a part of the U.S. Passenger Vessel Act, is that cruise ships always have to stop in an international port. And I should have known that. I had read that act before. Yes, that's how boring I am. So I knew the rules, but somehow that evaded me when I had booked this trip. So if anybody is planning a cruise, think about that. Even if you have Nexus, because that's not going to help you. It doesn't matter about your skin color at that stage, your age, your background, what career you have. Nobody is immune. We could be all pulled to one side and go through what I did. When I was sitting in that little room for 2.5 hours, one question that I asked myself, I thought to myself, it was a nice week and a half in the heat and the sunshine. But then I said, was the heat and sunshine worth what you're experiencing right now?
Right.
This uncertainty of not knowing how your day is going to end and if I'm going to end up back in Canada. And of course, I said to myself, no, the answer is it is not worth it. So anyone that's cruising or even doing a connection or going to the US, really think about that. And I will, I guess, probably close down that by saying that when I was in that room, I made my decision. Future travel to the US is now over. No connections to the US. Though I love cruises, they have cruises in Europe. I'll have to examine those. So, looking ahead to the future, my travel habits will change.
Mhm.
Uh, if there's ever another United States government that brings back, things to the way they were somewhat before this administration, we have a saying in human resources about, a bond of trust when it's broken can be hard to repair.
Mhm.
And for me, that really signified what happened. And my bond of trust with the United States at this moment is broken. And it's going to take a long time, if ever, for that to be repaired. And
Right.
then once I do get new travel habits established, even if things go back to normal there, I might choose to still never go back.
Mhm. I could totally understand that. I mean, I've been kind of emphasizing on my channel that even after 3 years, when Trump is gone, has anything really changed, right? And it's going to be tough for a lot of us to kind of forget what's happened in 2025. And you're right, travel habits change. I mean, people are already putting the US out of their mind and going to other places, within
Mhm.
Canada, Europe, Asia, or wherever else, right? So I'm with you on that. And, for me, even after 3 years, it might not change for me. And I've learned the world is a big place, right? And there's definitely a lot more places to be able to visit. And I feel personally, I mean, this is kind of me going off on a tangent a little bit, but I feel Canadians have been going to the US just out of convenience and due to proximity. And if you
Oh
go a
my
little bit,
goodness.
yeah,
No,
I mean,
no,
if you
I'll
go,
let you continue, and then I'm going to say something because it's almost like you read my mind.
yeah, because I mean, for me, I used to go to Las Vegas, I used to go to California, and even Hawaii, just because it's convenient, right? It's anywhere from a 2 hour to maybe a maximum 6 hour flight to Hawaii or whatever it is, 5 hours. But that was out of convenience. And if you go a little bit farther, if you go to Europe, if you go to South America or Asia, there's so much more out there that the world offers than just what the United States has. So I do hope that anyone listening right now realizes that there's a lot more to this earth that we're on right now versus just, going to Disneyland or going to Las Vegas or New York or Florida. And I do hope that this is a real eye opener for Canadians that, hey, we got to expand where we go. So,
I agree. And, it was almost like you were reading my mind to a past situation. And I think this was roughly around 1999, 2000.
mhm,
And I was catching a flight from Buffalo. And so I had to go through, I took the bus down because it wasn't that far. So we had
yeah,
to get off and I got one of those angry, arrogant border agents at
yeah,
that time. And he's like, I want to see your return ticket. Why are you going here? Blah, blah, blah. And then I finally said to him, and I said, you know what, sir? I said, if you think that I want to live in the United States, that's like, that's not anything I want to do. I have no family there.
mhm,
I says, the only reason I'm going right now is, and that's when I had started my HR career, is that, I have limited annual leave at the moment. And it is only that a
yeah,
matter of convenience. I could be south in the heat in 3 hours. And
yeah,
I said to him further, I said, back in the 70s of Canada, we were very close to having the Turks and Caicos. And I said, if we had that agreement signed and if the Turks and Caicos became a part of Canada, you would never even see me in the US because that would be my only destination at that stage.
hmm and that, yeah, I mean, I think that's right. You're right that many Canadians just go to the US because it's a quick 2, 3, 4 hour flight at max,
Mhm.
right? And with everything going on right now, I mean, my hope is that, my viewers start to expand their horizons in terms of where they travel and really see the world, right? Maybe it's easy for me to say because, I've traveled quite a bit for work. And, when I travel for work, I kind of get in a little vacation out of it as well. But seeing the world and seeing what else is out there, it's really eye opening. And it makes me realize that, hey, I spent way too much time in the US. And in my younger days, in my 20s and 30s, I should have been going farther than, or I should have been exploring the world more than just, going to the US. So,
And that's the silver lining.
yeah,
I mentioned earlier that I'm an optimist, and when I was thinking about, it, I said, that's probably the lesson for me to learn from this. And this is the optimistic side: is that this is now going to force me to change my future travel. This
right.
will allow me to explore other areas that I've always wanted to see, but now I will.
Yeah. So to end this interview, just more on a lighter note, where are you going to go next? Where are you thinking of visiting now that the United States is crossed off your list?
Doing a little bit of research this week, and I think maybe during the month of February, I'll take that entire month. I've been looking down at Playa del Carmen. Panama is another place, Panama City. So these are places I've wanted to see. Or even though it's not going to be plus 30, but there's a lot of cruises from Europe. There's a cruise line, MSC, and they have a lot of ships in Europe that still operate through the winter.
Mhm.
And I've been looking at some of those, and they have some good fares. So I would tack on like maybe 10 days before or after the cruise to explore parts of Europe because I haven't been to Europe since 2008. So obviously things are different since I was there. So
Mhm.
that might, anything, I'm open for anything now, with the exception, of course, of going to the country south of us.
Well, glad to hear that. And, like I said, it's a big world out there and lots of places to explore.
Oh, yes. And I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to doing that.
Good. Mr. R, really want to thank you for sharing your story. And I do hope that the viewers that are listening to this right now take it into account if you are still on the fence of going to the US. I mean, it doesn't take very much for anyone to be randomly picked as a POI. We'll never know the reason why. But, I think your story will help people kind of, okay, I might not be immune to it, right? So,
And I think that's a very key message. And that's one that you've been giving on your channel.
yeah.
And I've now lived through it, thinking about having all of my own security clearances for my work environment, having the Nexus card, never breaking the law in my life either in any country I've ever visited.
Mhm.
Everything I tried to do properly, yet I was still pulled aside. It truly can be anyone.
So definitely the message is that nobody is immune.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. R. I really appreciate you, reaching out to me and wanting to get your story out. And hopefully it does, help give some perspective to the audience. And, I think if you're listening to this right now in the audience and you have people that may need to hear this, send them this video and let them know that, hey, if you're thinking about still going on the cruise, you might want to watch this video.
And
So,
I
yeah,
agree.
yeah,
And thank you, by the way, for taking the email, for getting and reaching back out to me. And this will be the last thing I say because I'm sure your
yeah.
poor viewers are probably bored to tears by now. Uh, but
Yeah.
when you talk about getting the message out, because once this message or once this video goes up, I plan to send it to my family and friends. So when I got back last week, I only told a few initially because I was, but I said at the beginning, a little bit embarrassed for my lack of judgment. But then I reached out to a high school friend. I said, "Oh, by the way, I know you sometimes travel in the winter. This is what happened to me." And I went out and did errands, came back, and she had left me a message saying, "Thank you so much for sharing this." She said, "My husband and I were going to do a trip to Costa Rica, but coming back because of the way the flights were, we had to do a connection in JFK. We're not
Mhm.
going to do this anymore." So
Yeah.
she said that they're planning a spring vacation in Europe instead. So then I posted my experience to the main Facebook page, expecting a lot of criticism, but quite surprisingly, there was a lot of support. So I definitely am going to refer everybody once this video goes up, certainly on my Facebook page, to go and take a listen so they can hear exactly, because I just provided a little bit of an overview and
Mhm.
gave you more details here. So they'll be able to hear with their own ears because they know me exactly what had happened.
No, that's good. I mean, it's really about getting the message out, right? And like you said earlier, I've been saying it on my channel. Yeah, 9 out of 10 people, they might be okay, but if you're that one person, just like yourself, you have to go through 3 hours of nervousness with CBP. So I'm
Oh,
definitely
yeah. It's
happy.
not
Yeah,
pleasant. It's
yeah.
not pleasant.
I can't imagine it. So I mean, I'm definitely happy to share your story. And, I think in the future, keep in touch. And I'm very curious to see where you decide to travel. If there's any questions, I guess, from the community or they have any questions for you, I'll be more than happy to relay them over to you.
Oh, absolutely. I'm all about whether it's education or answering questions. If anyone does,
Mhm.
let Mr. Leaf know. He has my email, and Mr. Leaf, you could forward me everything.
Sure. Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. R. I wish the best to you and, keep in touch and let us know where you're going instead of the US.
Absolutely, and I'm looking forward to hearing your co-host soon.
Yeah, I apologize. I had to kick the co-host out. I mean, I don't think the mic picked it up because I'm using a different program, but I could definitely hear it and I could definitely see the cat roaming around and just yelling. So I had to pause earlier and kick out the cat. So yeah, I mean, I guess she wanted to be part of it too. But I think when I'm doing interviews, it's a little bit of a different scenario than me creating my videos. So
Well,
yeah.
everyone loves your co-host, including me. So don't
Well,
be
thank
too
you.
hard on your co-host.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. R. And we'll be in touch.
Okay, you take care.
You too. Thank you.